at what intensities, right? So at what heart rate or how fast he's going. And I can actually see what his body is using, again, for fuel when he's doing activity. Okay. So I take the combination of those two tests, and then I provide him exactly what his daily nutrition needs to look like to support his activity. Well, we're going over his testing results, and he says to me, Anna, he's like, how can I get this in my clinic? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, my patients are living longer, but their quality of life is so poor. How can I get your system, your testing in with my patients? And I was like, oh, I've been doing this for athletes for many years now, but it applies to everyone. And that got me really going down that path. If I want to have the biggest impact on this world, it's not going to be with just working with athletes for performance gains. Now, don't get me wrong. I love athletes. I think it's great, but I can have a much larger impact by taking these same kind of applications from the nutrition component and applying them to they apply to everyone. And again, it goes back to blood sugar optimization, which for us is what we call metabolic efficiency. And so every client that comes in, and as you saw on our website, we work with a lot of weight management, people that are either overweight or underweight or just looking to maintain. They just want the tools to know how to do that. And then we work with a lot of diabetics, actually type 1 and type 2. And, we're looking at blood sugar optimization, even with our type 1s, some of them, they wear continuous glucose monitors, which is awesome. What a cool tool, and so we just help them to be better with the amount of insulin that they're actually having to give themselves, based off of, the nutrition plan that we help them create. And then we also are Well Mama, which I'm glad that you saw that. So kind of how the Well Mama came up was as I started testing and bringing our program into this clinic with this primary care physician, I started, I was like, I started seeing a lot of really sick people. Yeah. And I remember saying to my husband, I'm like, how did they get to this point? I'm so accustomed to seeing a lot of athletes, which I wouldn't say that they're all very healthy. Just because they may be fit or they exercise does not mean that they're healthy.
True.
And so, but I'm seeing really sick people, a lot of people with type 2, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease. And so I said, I'm like, I've got to educate the kids. If I can get to the kids, and I can start to provide them with the tools, then they won't develop these diseases. We won't see this later in life, right? And then I went, oh, you know what? Actually, I need to take it one step further, and I need to go to the pregnant moms. Because if we really want to make a change with epigenetics, that's where the change is going to happen. And possibly even the women that maybe are of childbearing age. Maybe they are just now starting to think about that they want to maybe conceive or have a family,
Yeah.
And so what I did was I was working with a perinatal doctor at the time, and I went to him and I said, hey, I think we need to start looking at labor and delivery a little bit differently. And he's like, what do you mean? And right around that time, I was coaching a lady that was racing the Leadville 100. It's a big mountain biking race in Leadville, Colorado.
Yeah.
And she did it in 10 and a half hours. And I had all of her heart rate data, and I came back to that perinatal doctor and I said, would you mind giving me heart rate data for a 10 and a half hour labor and delivery? And he's like, what are you talking about? Sure. And I put them on a slide next to each other, and they were almost identical. And I said, this is what I was talking about. We need to really think about how we prepare these women's bodies in order for them to have the best outcome in labor and delivery. We need to think about it as preparing them for an athletic event.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Wow.
And so we need to make sure that, because what I was seeing in that data was every time my client was going up, you know, a steep, punchy type climb, it was just like that mom having a contraction. And so if you're going to say to these women, you know, hey, just sit there for the next 9 months, and then all of a sudden you are going to have the most traumatic experience of your life, you know, where your physiology is going to be maxed, but we're not going to prepare you for that. Like, we're not going to help you know exactly what to eat. We're not going to help you know exactly how to move your body, how to manage stress, you know? And so what I decided to do was put together this Well Mama package where we bring them in and we actually do our testing. So we get our baseline data from them, and then we begin to take them through their pregnancy, essentially, where now we are addressing their daily nutrition, we're addressing their movement, and we're addressing that stress management component, you know, through their breathing. And now we're setting them up for success, to have a better outcome in labor and delivery, and then into postpartum, you know, because I truly believe that some of these women that are suffering from postpartum depression, it's because they never recovered from that traumatic experience that they had in labor and delivery.
Wow.
And so it's just like, if you went to, you probably see this quite a lot. You have people that compete in your Spartan races, and they go out there and they, you know, they're like, I'm a Spartan, and they do the race, but their physiology is taken to the max, and they may not recover. They may never do another one again.
Yeah.
Like, they get through it, but afterwards they are in such a hole, you know? And so, because they don't recover.
Yeah.
It has maxed their physiology. And so if you know that data and you know those numbers, we are now able to really help people with knowing, like, how to prepare, you know, how to be properly prepared, not just for, like I said, an athletic event, but potentially for a labor and delivery, potentially for having enough energy to get through the day, you know, for our executives, you know, that we work with, for them to be able to be on their game all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because we optimize their blood sugar.
I love it.
That was a pretty long-winded response to that, but I do believe that, like, we can really make a big impact, you know, with people.
I think what you're doing with the moms is very special, because I never heard it put in that perspective, preparing them for that type of event. The comparison of the Leadville race, I happen to know what that race is a great comparison. You know, I want to ask you about not necessarily postpartum, but, you know, for example, my wife has, she had anxiety, and that was one of the things that kind of came out of having the babies. And she recovered from that from exercise. You know, the exercise is what changed her life. She, you know, I mentioned to you earlier, she never did any exercise in her life. And then all of a sudden, you know, she's got stress and anxiety and all these things, and she got away from that through her physical exercises and stuff. Are you working with women in that respect?
Absolutely. And so just know, like, for your wife, the reason why her anxiety was lessened through the exercise was because she was getting that respiratory benefit. Okay. So what happens is that with anxiety, you know, with stress, we build up a lot of lactic acid accumulation. And I'll say that it's really like hydrogen, but most people know it as lactic acid. And what happens is that lactic acid, we're always building it, you know, and it builds into our muscles, it spills over into our blood. Our blood's in direct contact with our brain, and our brain's like, wait, hold on, it's getting really acidic in here. And so what it will do is it will make your muscles stop contracting, right? Well, the way that you can actually delay lactic acid accumulation is actually through your breath and by actually breathing out CO2. And so your wife, now that she started exercising and she started to increase her respiratory rate and actually expelling that CO2, she was able to buffer that lactic acid accumulation, essentially. And so that's how she could keep her brain calm. Okay. So the same thing applies with people who do yoga, they're going in, if they're doing yoga properly, they're going in and they're really getting that respiratory benefit in order to keep their brains calm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, we teach a lot of breathing techniques, to people, and really just teaching them to breathe from their diaphragm as opposed to breathing, from their chest. And that way, that deep breath and really focusing on that exhale, and they can really calm themselves down, and can kind of combat that stress and anxiety.
That brings a whole lot more explanation to, we've got a private trainer, and we first started going there. He had this box of straws, like, okay, we're going to work on our breathing for the first couple months, and, it was the first thing that we learned. And I watch new people walk through the door, and it's the first thing they learn is breathing and a focus on breathing and learning to breathe better. Because as you just suggested, we just don't understand the proper techniques of breathing to enhance our own physical abilities and well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can change your mindset in an instant by just being mindful and taking those breaths. Just stop, take 2 belly breaths, and then continue on with your day. I mean, that is something that we drive home. Our 3 pillars of health are nutrition, movement, and breathing. And so obviously, if we put that in there, that it's major. And it impacts everything, At some point too, I will talk to you about your wife, even with the anxiety and the sleep, that comes, because that's a big, huge deal, especially after she had, your children and stuff. And was she sleeping properly, because then all of a sudden that anxiety does start to, when she's not getting deep sleep, then she's not able to really activate. And I don't know if you want me, this may kind of be going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
comment on the sleep component.
Yeah, I want to hear you say that, but I guess before you do, it's interesting because I've talked to so many mothers in the last couple of years since I've become a father, and they suffer with anxiety, and most of them relate it to that motherhood. And I want to hear the sleep part, because I think if there's moms listening, they're going to learn something.
Oh, 100%. So the deal with sleep is that, okay, so how we have the lymphatic system, right? And that's our waste management system. Well, in 2015, they discovered that we actually our brain has its own waste management system, and it's called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is actually only activated during deep sleep. And deep sleep is the part of your circadian rhythms that takes place usually earlier in the night. And so what they discovered, what research is showing, is that people that are developing, that have Alzheimer's, that have dementia, that have anxiety or depression, it's that they are not getting adequate deep sleep. And since they aren't getting that adequate deep sleep, it's not activating that glymphatic system, which is that, again, it's clearing out that amyloid and that tau, right? So I know that's very sciencey to talk about, but I think that should paint a really clear picture to know how the impact of sleep and actually getting that deep sleep. So with our moms, it's extremely difficult, right? With newborn baby, there's a lot of new variables that are coming into play, but depending upon their support system and also the tools that they have on board, when they can get that baby into a place where they're actually the mom is able to sleep and get into that deep sleep, even if she is woken up later, in the night in order to feed or whatever it needs to be, as long as she is getting that deep sleep earlier in the night, then we will be able to really combat that anxiety and any of that, depression that could potentially come on, because the glymphatic system has been able to be activated. And so, basically clearing out all of the junk in the, brain. So.
Yeah. Wow. And for the men out there, moms want to be these warriors and Gosh, my wife was such a warrior. She'd be like, hey, I know you need your sleep because you're the guy working in the household, providing for us. I'll get up and take care of the baby. But,